Well, I thank everyone tonight for the beautiful testimonies, and thank you, Amanda, for those readings. I thought you read from Mrs. Eddy, miscellaneous writings, where she was speaking about Paul taking pleasure in necessities, for they tested and developed latent power. And that's so encouraging because the theme of this being about our triumph, how in science we always do triumph. We can await that triumph. But as we're going through some of our trials, we can rejoice that we are developing latent powers. As Florence said beautifully, we are learning more of God, more and more of God, and less of the era of this world. And in doing that, we do come upon great triumph. Such beautiful, beautiful thoughts, and I'm so grateful for it. It was mentioned tonight about Martha Wilcox and her book Addresses, and we sell that. And it's a wonderful book. And I remember for me it was quite a life changer. And she did work in Mrs. Eddy's home, and she was taught directly by Mrs. Eddy. And some time ago, I found in her article, War, on page 388, where Mrs. Wilcox writes, "In Christian Science, we understand that God made man and gave him presence and certainty and position. And man does not desire to get from somebody or some other nation, but draws from infinity." Now, at that time, I was struggling quite a bit with inferiority complex, I guess you'd call it. I was so very timid, and those three words just jumped out at me: presence, certainty, position. We get those, we draw on those from God. We don't have to nervously try to find it in some self-help book or in some person or some educational school. They come from God. And those words, I looked those words up in the 1828 dictionary. Presence, a calm, collected state of mind with its faculties at command. Certainty, full of assurance, exemption from doubt, a settled state. And position, the state of being placed, a proposition affirmed as a fixed principle. All of that gave me such a sense of peace. And when you think of presence of mind, and where does that come from? But being in the presence of God. All of these qualities come from His presence. And as I worked with that thought, that statement from this book, so much of my fears and my insecurities left, because I knew my insecurities were just based on this human sense of Mary. But when I knew as a child of God I had these qualities, and God is ever with us, those insecurities left. I'm so grateful to this church for Mrs. Eddy giving us our wonderful textbook, for this clear, correct explanation of Christian Science that goes to the bottom of all our problems and heals. So glad to be with you tonight.